MatPat is at it again, this time attempting to tackle Waluigi's origins. Will he fail? Will he succeed? Let's find out. By this point you guys know how it works, but once again, I'd like to say that I have nothing against MatPat or the Game Theorist writing team. Throughout this video, I'm going to be responding to MatPat and referring to him by name, even though in reality there are many writers behind these videos. The reason I'll be referring to MatPat specifically is because he's the face of the channel and the one narrating this video. For all intents and purposes, he's framed as the one proposing this theory. With that out of the way, let's skip ahead to the start of the theory.
Waluigi was first introduced in Mario Tennis 64, just so Wario could have himself a doubles partner. They actually considered making a Wa Peach for him, but Shigeru Miyamoto rejected the idea because he was afraid of what kind of girl Wario would date. Something that we would actually see a year later in Wario Land 4, ironically enough.
While Princess Shokora in Wario Land 4 may take a Wario-like form if the player only collects 2 to 5 treasure chests during the course of the game, this is not necessarily how a supposed Wa Peach would look. And it certainly isn't the type of girl Wario would date. I say this because not only is Wario pretty disturbed when this form of Princess Shokora kisses him, but we see him with other women during the ending credits of Wario Land 4, as well as one of the endings of Virtual Boy Wario Land. He's also called Mona from the WarioWare games cute, and gets excited when he believes Princess Peach is his girlfriend in Mario Superstar Baseball. So in short, yes, we have seen the type of girl Wario would date, but no, Shokora's Wario-esque form is not one of them.
But we're not here to talk about the creation of Waluigi, we're here to talk about that sweet, sweet lore. Over the past 22 years, he's been snubbed by Nintendo over and over again. They won't give him a game, they won't make him playable in Smash, and as a result, his origins remain this big mystery. All we're told about him prior to the events of Mario Tennis 64 is that he trained in secret before challenging the Mario brothers to take the title of Superstar from them. Other than that, nothing. His origins are so ambiguous that his Mario Hoops baller name is literally the question. His whole thing is being an enigma wrapped inside a majestic mustache, but no longer, I say. It's time Waluigi gets the attention that he deserves, and not just for his sick dance moves. And not only have we figured out his secret backstory, we even know who his dad is.
I can already see where this is going. MatPat is largely correct here, however. Waluigi is an enigma, a total mystery. This is by design though, and there really isn't that much to dive into as a result. Let's hear him out for the time being though, maybe he'll surprise me.
Now, when he first appeared on the scene, most people assumed that Waluigi was Wario's brother. And that makes a lot of sense, right? The evil counterparts to the Mario brothers would also be brothers themselves. Plus, there are a lot of direct sources just confirming the idea. When Mario Tennis was first released, Nintendo's website referred to Wario as Waluigi's big brother. Nintendo of Europe said it too. There's also a series of articles that appeared on Nintendo of Europe's website between 2001 and 2003 called Wario's Warehouse. There again, Waluigi is referred to as Wario's brother.
Yes, many older English websites refer to Wario and Waluigi as brothers. However, none of those are direct sources, as MatPat put it. Many of these websites contain blatant misinformation and lore errors, as they weren't written by the people who actually made the games, created these characters, and wrote these stories. For example, the page for Mario and Luigi Partners in Time on Nintendo's website described Toadsworth as Peach's father. None of these sources are valid, and cannot be considered canon in any capacity. If the original Japanese sites or developers stated that Wario and Waluigi were brothers, then it'd be a different story, but they make no reference to their relationship whatsoever.
Now, these are things that Nintendo of Japan could have corrected, but never did over the course of 3 years.
And no, Nintendo of Japan wouldn't have corrected this regardless. It's a bit ridiculous to assume that they check every piece of flavor text written by interns to see if it fits into the lore.
Of course, this is Nintendo we're talking about. Nothing is ever gonna be that cut and dry. There's a news brief in Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Winter Games that specifically says Wario and Waluigi aren't brothers. That's it. That is all it says. It is very direct. In Mario Super Sluggers, Wario refers to Waluigi as his, quote, sneaky pal. And that sort of terminology also matches what Charles Martinet, the voice actor for Mario, Wario, and Waluigi, seems to believe. He said once in an interview, quote, I don't actually know if they're brothers or not. I don't think so. I think they're just two nice, evil guys who found each other.
While Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Winter Games and the word of Charles Martinet aren't canon per se, this is correct. There is much more information indicating that Wario and Waluigi aren't brothers, and they've been referred to as just pals as recently as Mario Golf Super Rush and Mario Party Superstars.
Then Nintendo just decided to own up to the confusion in Super Smash Bros. Melee and Brawl, where Waluigi's trophies describe their relationship more ambiguously, saying it's unclear or a mystery.
How many times do we have to teach you this lesson, old man? Once again, Super Smash Bros. Isn't canon. Information from the Super Smash Bros. Games cannot be used as evidence in Mario theories.
So if they're not brothers, then who is Waluigi? Because while Nintendo's words may say conflicting things about Waluigi, there's one part of him that's undeniable and unchanging.
Once again, it's unfair to suggest that Nintendo's words say conflicting things about Waluigi. The games themselves, as well as their manuals and original language sites, are all completely consistent in their stance of Wario and Waluigi not being related.
His design. That's right, theorists, it's time for my favorite Mario lore-solving tool, genetics.
Ah, yes. The classic Mario lore-solving tool that has solved a grand total of 0 Mario mysteries. At this point, you can nearly write off a theory the second someone pulls out a Punnett square.
Let's talk about some traits that we've talked about a lot on this channel before, eye color. If these two were intended to be brothers, well, you'd expect some key elements of their designs to be the same. So let's look at exactly that. Both Wario and Waluigi have blue-gray eyes. If one of them had brown eyes, which is the dominant gene, well then the chances of them being related would go way down. So the fact that they have themselves the recessive blue-gray eye tends to strengthen the idea that they could be related. They also have the same blue rim around their eye socket as though they haven't gotten sleep for the last week. Admittedly, this is a weird connection and it's unclear whether it's genetic or not, but you know what? I'm not gonna turn down any evidence no matter how random it might be.
Having blue eyes makes them just as likely to be Mario and Luigi's brothers. In fact, every major human in Mario's core cast has blue eyes. The blue rims also mean nothing. Yes, they could be a genetic thing, but they also could be makeup or related to lifestyle. You have to assume they're genetic to use them as evidence. And you know what they say about assuming.
That's not the only thing either. Their noses also scream we're related. Obviously, the shapes are very different, with Waluigi's having a sharp point and Wario's being much wider and rounded. Then again, both of them are hot pink.
Unfortunately for your point, MatPat, these two noses are completely different shades of pink. While Wario has a paler pinkish red, Waluigi's nose is a medium pink, bordering on magenta. Granted, factors like lighting can make them appear more similar than they are, but combined with completely different nose shapes, this point amounts to nothing.
That cannot be a coincidence. I mean, I challenge you to come up with someone else in this franchise who has a pink nose.
Booster, Dr. Crygor, Jimmy T, Jimmy P, The Thangs, Boy, Tiny, Professor Egad, Master Mantis, Garbage Boy, that Princess Shikoro form you mentioned earlier? The list goes on.
That said, the cherry on top of our genetics sundae is, as it usually is in these sorts of videos, the ears. They both have themselves detached earlobes, which is noteworthy because most characters in the Mario franchise have earlobes that are attached to their face. That means that they're more likely to be related to each other than anyone else. What really caught my attention was the fact that both characters have pointed ears. This appears to be an exaggerated form of a rare congenital deformity called Stahl's ear, which gives the ear a pointed, elf-like appearance. Rough estimates put it at occurring in less than 1 in 6,000 children. Because of how rare it is, there's actually very little research available on the condition, but the general consensus is that it's likely hereditary.
It's worth mentioning here that having red or pink noses and pointed ears are incredibly common traits amongst others of Wario and Waluigi's race, such as Booster and Dr. Crygor, as I mentioned earlier. This is just a trait these humans tend to have. Comparing it to the real-world Stahl's ear, when it's clearly a more common trait amongst a certain race in this world, is downright silly. And while yes, they do have detached earlobes, this is once again an incredibly common trait seen in plenty of other humans in the franchise.
So, while not 100% confirmed, it does seem most likely that Wario and Waluigi are, in fact, brothers.
Of course, the conclusion reached here is the incorrect one. The truth is that while there are similarities between them, Wario and Waluigi also have their fair share of differences. From their chins, to their face shapes, to their nose shapes, to their proportions and builds. There's really nothing connecting the two that also wouldn't connect them to countless others.
While it's certainly cool that we can show a lot of evidence suggesting that Wario and Waluigi are brothers, it's not exactly mind-blowing, so I'm gonna take it a step further. What if I told you that I can not only prove that Wario and Waluigi are siblings, I can also prove who the father is? I believe that Waluigi's father is none other than the forgotten Mario rival, Foreman Spike, from the classic NES game, Wrecking Crew. In the game, Mario works as part of a demolition team, and Spike is the boss, trying to knock Mario off of platforms or trying to hoard all the money for himself. Spike's entry in the Great Mario Character Encyclopedia suggests that his greed may even be worse than Wario's. So, he's greedy, and he resorts to sabotage. I mean, what other character does that remind you of?
The Great Mario Character Encyclopedia isn't a valid source. It's yet another guide. And as I've said before, guides like these shouldn't be used as sources when proposing theories. Guides are almost always chock full of errors, particularly about the story, and as MatPat puts it, lore of the games they're based on. This is due to the fact that they're typically licensed out to other companies. Said companies' writers are allowed to embellish the stories or add details from their own interpretations without being overseen by the original writers. While Foreman Spike is definitely greedy, nothing within the games themselves indicates his greed is even remotely comparable to Wario's. And Wrecking Crew 98 indicates that he mainly antagonized Mario for sport rather than profit.
Now, admittedly, that is some pretty weak sauce evidence. Sure, they share some personality traits, but that doesn't really prove anything. He doesn't even look anything like Wario or Waluigi, and you'd be right, provided you were just talking about his first appearance. However, the original Wrecking Crew isn't the only time that we see our buddy Foreman Spike. In 1998, Japan got the imaginatively titled Wrecking Crew 98, and of course, our boy Foreman Spike makes his triumphant return, only this time he looks a little bit different. Check out the nose. Nintendo decided to make it bright pink, thereby making him the only other character in the franchise with that design style.
Aside from Booster, Dr. Crygor, Jimmy T, Jimmy P, The Thangs, Boy, Tiny, Professor Egad, Master Mantis, Garbage Boy.
You may have also noticed that he's lost that magnificent beard of his from the first game, revealing instead a cleft chin just like Wario, making him the perfect candidate for these guys' father. Foreman Spike even has a hint of Stall's ear going on. If you take a closer look at his sprite art from the game, you can see that the top of his ear has been made slightly pointier.
Admittedly, this is correct. Foreman Spike's redesign here is definitely inspired by Wario. However, this once again doesn't mean that they're related, especially since, as you'll soon see, he was redesigned once again in Mobile Golf, removing whatever potential connections may or may not have been there.
Heck, he even has their signature laugh. This guy is basically what you get if Wario and Waluigi did a fusion dance.
MatPat, that's a fan translation. As you said, the game only ever released in Japan. It never received an official localization. You can't use a style of laughter from a fan translation as evidence.
In 2001, Spike appeared in the Game Boy Color game Mobile Golf. In it, he has himself two profiles, and they use almost the exact same wording as Waluigi's character profile, both stating that they trained in secret and that they're actually hard workers. Bear in mind, Mobile Golf was made by Camelot, the same company that made Waluigi himself, so them sharing descriptions is hardly an accident.
Except for the fact that the Waluigi description you just cited was from Nintendo staff, not Camelot. It's also worth noting that Foreman Spike's hardworking nature refers to the Wrecking Crew, while Waluigi's refers to his sports training. Taking things out of context is what leads to the similarities.
They even give Spike the same color scheme that they gave Waluigi in Mario Tennis on Game Boy Color. Beautiful, beautiful purple. Waluigi also seems to have carried on the family business of construction. Mario Party E was a board game for the Game Boy Advance that came out back in 2003. What made it unique is the fact that it used the e-reader accessory, which would scan in real-world cards to affect what was happening on the screen. In this title, there's a minigame called Waluigi's Reign, where our favorite meme lord is operating something that resembles construction equipment, all while surrounded by steel girders and beams. His level is a construction site. More importantly though is Waluigi's island in Mario Party 3, where his crew of piranha plants is seen demolishing Luigi's property in order to make room for Waluigi posters. Notice that the Waluigi emblem is on the purple hammer in the upper right corner of the board, suggesting that Waluigi owns this equipment, construction and demolition equipment, just like his dear old dad. And that's not all. Nintendo of Europe's website description for the Waluigi pinball track in Mario Kart DS states that Waluigi constructed it himself.
Again, using English language websites as a source. Not good.
And to top it off, his signature kart in Mario Kart DS is the Gold Mantis. It's not even a go-kart, it's an excavator. And not just any excavator either, one that is almost identical to Spike's in his Mobile Golf concept art.
I mean, sure, they're both excavators, but in what sense are they almost identical? I just don't see it. They've got completely different designs. If connection was truly intended, there will be an attention to detail with this sort of thing. As well as that, a lot of characters in Mario Kart DS just get random vehicles. For example, Drybones is a tank. It could absolutely be a coincidence.
In DDR Mario Mix, do you want to guess what his theme song is? It's a track called Destruction Dance, a remix of the Wrecking Crew bonus stage theme. Coincidence?
I think so? Much like the previous point, Dance Dance Revolution Mario Mix has a tendency to assign random songs to different characters the player faces throughout the game. For example, the Super Mario Bros. 2 ground theme is remixed for the Boo stage, despite Boo's having no connection to that game whatsoever.
Honestly, this is just scratching the surface of Waluigi's connections to Spike. I have myself a dump truck full of other smaller details.
Well, please, MatPat, feel free to share them. It would certainly help strengthen your theory, which, at the moment, is looking quite flimsy.
But then I realized that all of this evidence is actually highlighting a bigger issue. While Waluigi clearly shares strong connections with Form and Spike, outside of the nose, cleft chin, and large frame, Wario seems to share very little. Waluigi and Spike are in construction. Wario is into farming. His unlockable signature cart in Mario Kart DS was the Dragonfly Tractor. The Fire Attack cutscene in Game & Watch Gallery 4 shows Wario farming tomatoes, and in that cutscene he's accompanied by his pet chicken, who he loves so much that one time he prioritized her over retrieving his stolen treasure. Wario also seems to have himself some kind of German origin, speaking German on multiple occasions.
Oh, I missed.
Even his Super Mario Strikers theme is Germanic in nature.
All of this seems pretty superfluous, especially since Wario has had an Italian-inspired accent similar to Mario's, Luigi's, and Waluigi's since Charles Martinet took over the role in 1997. Wario's original German influences apparently came from Thomas Spindler, Nintendo's German translator, who voiced the character in the Japanese version of Mario Kart 64. However, in localization, Charles Martinet redubbed the lines and proceeded to become Wario's official voice actor internationally, making his Italian-influenced Wario the version that stuck canonically. To say that Wario is currently German in any capacity is misleading, and doesn't take into account the context of the situation.
If they're in fact brothers, why would Wario not realize this? Well, for that, we turn to one particular game, Yoshi's Island DS. In it, Bowser goes back in time to kidnap babies from all over the world in search of the 7 star children, even going so far as to kidnap a baby version of himself. Among those kidnapped children is none other than Wario. By the end of the game, all the babies are returned by storks to their families, with one exception, Wario. Wario overpowers his stork and instead sits on a raft full of treasure that was stolen from Bowser's castle. Gotta give it to Nintendo on that one. Way to keep it consistent there, guys. But all of this means that Wario never returned home.
Alright, this is a pretty huge claim, so let's break this down slowly. Again, Wario and Waluigi aren't brothers in the first place, but if they were, and had to be separated at a young age, Yoshi's Island DS wouldn't explain it. The way time travel works in Mario's universe doesn't allow for it. Keeping things simple, it's a bit like Back to the Future. When you time travel, you change the past and in turn the future you came from. Therefore, in the original version of events, Bowser never traveled back in time. The babies in the past weren't kidnapped. If Bowser traveling back in time was what caused Wario and Waluigi to be separated, then they would have known they were brothers in the present before Bowser went back. If Wario didn't get back to his parents after Yoshi's Island DS because of Bowser's meddling, then the timeline would have been changed completely. He'd never have grown up and become a childhood friend of Mario's. He'd never have moved to Diamond City and met Jimmy T. He probably wouldn't even act or dress the same based on how young he was at the time. Which leads me to my next point. Baby Wario was almost definitely returned to his home after the ending of the game. What actually happened here is Wario briefly got the stork to stop so he could play in the treasure. That's why the stork was still waiting for him on the raft instead of just abandoning him there. By the same logic you're using here, one could conclude that Baby Bowser wasn't returned to his home either, since he was on the same raft with Baby Wario, and we never see him return to his home before the game's end either.
And above everything else, this would explain why Wario doesn't call Waluigi his brother. He doesn't know. Neither of them do because they were separated at birth.
Or, perhaps neither of them do because they literally aren't brothers. Just a possibility. Just putting it out there.
That night when Kamek comes to find the Star Children, he took Wario and left Waluigi behind. Can you imagine Kamek trying to collect every baby in the world in order to find the Star Children, but he takes one look at you and just says, nope, not that one.
This is just attempting to lampshade a blatant hole in the theory. The question of why Baby Waluigi isn't with Baby Wario from the beginning of the game if they're brothers. Keep in mind that Kamek's toadies were literally kidnapping every baby from all over the world in search of the Star Children, and if there were multiple babies in one home, they were kidnapped together, as we saw with Mario and Luigi. There is no reason for them to have left Waluigi behind, especially since it's impossible to tell definitively who is and isn't a Star Child without using Kamek's crystal ball.
Wario's obsession with greed means he never returns home, thereby growing up on a farm with some German lady while Waluigi remains home with his father, Foreman Spike, eventually grown up to take over the family business. But just like Mario was drawn to Luigi by their brotherly bond, so too were Waluigi and Wario drawn together, without ever truly understanding why. But hey, that's just a theory. A game theory. Thanks for watching.
In all honesty, MatPat, I can kind of see where you're coming from on this one. There is certainly some compelling evidence with Waluigi's ties to construction, and the use of the destruction dance in Dance Dance Revolution Mario Mix. But in terms of the actual lore, where Foreman Spike is clearly still quite young, doesn't resemble Wario and Waluigi all that much, and lives on the other side of the planet, I'm sorry to say, it doesn't work. At most, the evidence indicates that Waluigi is an ex-construction worker. So look on the bright side. Even if you didn't get your controversial family plot twist, you might have managed to fill out his backstory a little bit more. It's quite funny, this theory was adapted from a post by user Tokiro7 on the Game Theorist subreddit. It gained barely any traction, but I did respond to it at the time, and a lot of the points used in this video were ones that I had already made there. I highly doubt that the writers of this episode of Game Theory didn't see my response, especially since some of the points and corrections I made there were actually used in this video. For example, Waluigi's Island from Mario Party 3. It was never brought up in the original theory. That was an additional connection to construction which I pointed out, as I too had admittedly noticed a pattern. The point I'm making here is that despite the theory's holes, the game theorists decided to publish it as a video anyway, which will unfortunately lead to a misconception held by tens of thousands of people, believing Waluigi and Spike to be related for years to come. This was avoidable. I think it's important when you have such a huge platform with millions of fans who will believe whatever you say to try and combat misinformation, not spread it. Ironically, this is something MatPat gave Disney flack for back in his film theory on Frozen 2, and frankly, it comes across as major hypocrisy. Once again, I am a game theory fan. I've been watching their videos for almost a decade, but I expect better. Suffice to say, Foreman Spike is not the father. Speaking of which, if you enjoyed this video, you may enjoy my previous videos where I debunk MatPat's theories on Bowser being Yoshi's dad and the biology of toads. I've also got some other big projects in the works, which are much more time consuming than these debunk videos, so please stay tuned. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later!